Alright, so it is July 2nd, 2011. Beautiful day, starting to feel like summer for the first time in a couple years. I'm really going to miss the summers in Pedro. It's a beautiful part of the world. It's been home for a long time. I'm getting rid of a lot of stuff right now. Before noon, just got rid of a couple TVs, wall unit, couple couches, router, modem, that type of thing. Really doing some purging, the most epic spring cleaning or summer cleaning session I've ever been part of. A big thing that I need to really get rid of now is just piles and piles of books. Stuff that's just in the garage, sitting there waiting for me to use or need or something like that. In my case, there's a lot of computer books, music books, graphic design, photography, Photoshop, Illustrator, that type of thing. And kind of breaks my heart to get rid of this stuff because I really did get a lot out of them. I owe a lot to them. But it's kind of all up in here now, you know what I mean? So let's start. Before I throw them out, or as I throw them out, I wanted to capture them so that I can remember them if I ever care someday. So first on the list is Mastertrax Pro 5. It's a MIDI sequencer for the Mac. Must have had a Mac Classic back in the day. I'm thinking 1991, 92. Anyway, it doesn't matter. We're tossing them all. Mastertrax Pro 5, moving right along. This is one of my favorites. It was Dr. T's Upbeat 2.0 for the Mac. It was a sequencer. It was a rhythm sequencer that allowed you to go in there and do things that you normally couldn't really do with stuff like Mastertrax Pro. With rhythm, you can set up really cool polyrhythms and group notes together in various mathematical ways that were really kind of fun and cool while I was studying music. Look, I even highlighted stuff. Anyway, came with a floppy disk and a user manual and all that stuff. Upbeat. Here, this is my baby. Illustrator 6. This was my baby. Back in the day, I think I called Illustrator my favorite program of all time. It was the most elegant, tightest, useful tool. It was by Deke McClellan, and look, he even signed it to Jace. Enjoy Illustrator 6. I went and hung out with that guy in the Valley back in the day. It's 1996. Yeah, it's all vintage. Front to back, man, cover to cover. And you know what, kids? It really does start with Illustrator. You want to play with the big boys. You learn your pen tool, and you live, eat, and breathe Bezier. That stuff's got to get under your skin. Once you do that, you got it all down. It starts with Illustrator. Moving right along here. Photoshop native filters. Another sort of, when I was doing a lot of woodshedding in Photoshop, went through this and learned every single native filter in Photoshop 4. Look at all my notes. And you really start to understand the vocabulary of the filters and what they do to images. And then you just apply it as you go. So. Colossal Design, hardcover, just in case you want to go big. Big book of logos. I have about 50,000 of these things. It's all online. Photoshop 4 Bible. Another 1996-97 Deke McClellan book. Went through cover to cover, man, and I can't say enough about that. It really was my first sort of, my first year, half a year maybe, spent every night in here. And look, from Deke McClellan. Thanks for attending the sessions. I believe I even got quoted in the Photoshop 5 Bible. I remember his editor emailing me and saying, hey, we have this email. I was talking to Deke email, and she says, can we quote you? I never bought the Photoshop 5 Bible, but I think I'm one of the guys who talked about how great he is in that intro. Anyway, moving right along. Also in that vein, let's go this one. You know what? This is probably one of my favorite books of all time as far as Photoshop goes, as far as what I got out of the book. It is called Photoshop Studio Secrets, also by Deke McClellan. We were doing Photoshop 4 back in the time. It's a case study, sort of over-the-shoulder look at a handful of different sort of Photoshop ninjas that were doing different things, specifically, you know, type treatments and 3D and compositing and color correction and mixed media and web and all that type of thing. Commercial advertising, effects, stuff that was magic and just seemed impossible. And how did they do that type of thing? Well, you got to hang out with these guys and learn a lot. In that vein, an extension of that, but specific to web, was Web Design Studio Secrets, also by Deke. Again, talked to some of the young guys that were coming up and doing web specific stuff in Photoshop and case studies. Anyway, speaking of web graphics, designing web graphics by Linda Weinman. It's Lynda. Lynda.com. She's still around. She's done really well for herself up in Ojai, running technical and creative seminars, that type of thing. I know we have, I've been on there and they have tutorials and that type of thing. But really back in the day, when it came to web graphics, and color and ping and compression and JPEG and GIF and all that stuff, Linda was the queen when it came to that. She was the authoritative voice on how to prepare graphics, transparency, dithering, all that stuff, ground up. Linda. Also, Coloring Web Graphics 2, also by Linda. This one focused on color, hexadecimal, web safe, look, I even some of my notes in here, web palettes, that type of thing, RGB color space, which was all, new at the time, but, who cares now, right? Anyway, Coloring Web Graphics by Linda Weinman. This is Macromedia Studio MX. It's a manual. For those kids who aren't old enough to remember, there was this company called Macromedia that had this program called Director. It was a multimedia sort of creation tool. Maybe heard of Shockwave. They also had Freehand, which was a vector illustration tool that we use Illustrator for now. Also that came out of Macromedia was Flash and Dreamweaver, but they have since been picked up or acquired or merged with Adobe, so Macromedia, rest in peace. Last thing I need is a manual about Macromedia. All right, Photoshop for Artistry. Again, another sort of case study, over-the-shoulder look at stuff. I remember there's this guy, sort of a granola dude and his wife. They lived up in a cabin and just did Photoshop all day long. And sort of a photographer guy who was going digital and color correction and all this stuff. More notes. I was a big highlighter guy. 96, 97, 97. Photoshop for Artistry. Get it? Photoshop for Artistry? All right. Adobe Creative Suite Bible. This is later. This is more like Y2K. 2002, 2003, 4, 2004. This is after Photoshop went to 5, 6, 7, 8, and then they merged it to the Creative Suite, or CS, and all that stuff. But, let's see here. Then things started getting technical. Look, HTML Programmer's Reference, self-explanatory, PHP MySQL for dummies. You guys heard of WordPress? PHP is the language that it's all written on, open source. MySQL is the database that is running all that stuff. It's good stuff to know if you need to do it from the ground up, but, that's all done for us these days. Here's something. The animation book. Back in the day, I think I wanted to be a cartoonist because I loved it so much. I was getting into Flash, doing some motion graphics and animations and stuff like that, really finding myself in Flash because it's graphic design with a timeline. So being a drummer and a music guy, making things move over the course of time. And I started studying, the theory, some theory is old school animation, rotoscoping, that type of thing. And good stuff, applying it to Flash. Whatever, okay. Rest in peace. Print Production Handbook. As if. Teach yourself Linux. Linux I was getting into Unix at one point, and I actually had some old servers. I took an old PowerMac 7600. I installed Yellow Dog Linux on it, and I started sort of dicking around with that. And I did the same thing with another PC. I installed Red Hat. I was running scripts and running little applications and kind of doing that. Hosted on my cable modem here at Cox on port 8080 because they closed off 80. Cox. All right, Linux. DNS and bind. There it is, kids. That is the matrix, the domain name system, and bind. I was hosting websites and setting up name servers and canonical names and running mail servers and all that stuff. DNS, the domain name space, is what makes everything work. It's how things are found, how your .com is resolved to a specific machine on the net, and it's all very geeky, MIT sort of area of study. Did a lot of that, and actually wrote some essays on it and just kind of wrapping my brain around. The whole thing was all very cutting edge at the time. There is no spoon. Again, PHP for the World Wide Web, not to be confused with every other web or every other wide web that's out there. So if that's what you're looking for, this would be the book for you. What do we got going here? The Handbook of Pricing and Ethical Guidelines for Graphic Designers or Creatives. Not my favorite topic, to be honest with you, but it offered some guidance and formulas for calculating compensation and rates and all that stuff, depending on if you're advertising or photography or graphic art or illustration or whatever the case is, marketing. All right. And, wow, look at this. Creating Killer Websites by David Siegel. This book was the book that you were supposed to read. If you're a graphic designer in 96, 97, and you're going to do websites, which is just sort of a natural extension of graphic design anyway, this guy, David Siegel, was supposedly the authority on the topic. David Siegel and Linda, that is. Look at all my notes. I highlighted everything in here. Took this guy real seriously. Everything from typography to, you know, how HTML and tables and all that stuff. I remember this guy sort of a diva, had a lot of ego, sort of an artsy fartsy sort of dude who had his way of looking at it, and as if he was the only one who was able to figure it out. But creating killer websites. Title says it all. The Art of Third Generation Site Design, which is probably, I don't know, Stone Age compared to this generation. So anyway, creating killer websites. That, my friends, for now, is the first batch of material that's going in the blue bin. So, thank you for your help. It's been a pleasure. You did me well. Recycle in peace.